It's time to have your say. Welcome back to the Q&A, answering your questions on WWE, AEW, and much, much more here for another episode of Ask SCW, kicking off straight after this. So, coming up in today's episode, got such topics as Seth Rollins and WrestleMania. Who is going to be his opponent? Will Cody Rhodes be debuting on Monday Night Raw? Going to be talking about the unfortunate, horrific injury for Big E, but what it might mean for him on his return. And of course, we'll be kicking things off very shortly by that, that name change. No longer Pete Dunne, it is Butch. But before we begin, if you want to be involved on the next episode of Ask SCW, then drop your question in the comment section of this video. Leave the hashtag AskSCW. I know to include it in the next episode and give you a shout out as well here on YouTube, or you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all should be coming on your screen right about now. But without further ado, let's get on with our first question this week. And we're kicking things off with Austin Whitley saying, my question is, Butch, are they really serious? Unfortunately, they are. Look, let's be fair, when it comes to hearing the name Butch, this was more what I was used to back in the day with the Bushwhackers, and Pete Dunne, he ain't no Bushwhacker, let's be fair. But, I mean, for those that are unaware, he debuted on SmackDown this past week with Sheamus and Rich Holland. Was in a backstage interview segment, and he was introduced, and they said, look, you know him as a different name, but he's coming out now as his nickname, and his nickname is Butch. I don't think it helped as well with the outfit he was wearing either. He looked like he was going to go and sweep some chimneys as well while he was at it. But to be fair, look, for names, WWE look like they want a reaction these days. I mean, it seems to be what they're doing, because a lot of the names they give for superstars these days are just absolutely ridiculous. We look at Doudrop, we look at Gunter with that name change as well. A lot of them NXT UK, and noticing a theme here. NXT UK seems to be the indies. They come into NXT, they seem to keep the name, but when they go to Raw and SmackDown, that's when they change them. If you look with a lot of superstars when they join NXT from other companies like, I don't know, Impact Wrestling or NWA, wherever they've come from on the indies, a lot of times they change their names automatically. So we have time to get used to these awful name changes beforehand they go to the main roster. Let's look for, someone that got a bit of slack for the name change last year was LA Knight instead of Eli Drake. Now, I personally didn't mind that name as much at the time, but I think a lot of people now, if he was called up, would have been moaning about the name. It's the last thing they think of. They've had a year to digest it. But when you look at NXT, he's been in NXT for a long, long time now. He was the baddest man in NXT, and just recently got off a program with Tony D'Angelo as well. To then be called up to SmackDown and just think, we're going to forget everything that he's done previously before. Forget that he's like a 500-600 day NXT UK champion. Forget that he's been in War Games last year. Forget what he's just done on NXT 2.0, the place that was supposed to be the breeding ground for when you're called up to Raw and SmackDown. You kind of argue and say, what's the point of the system if you're going to make more changes when you get called up? But the other thing I will say is, look, NXT is about 25% of WWE's audience. If you look at the ratings, what it's like 500,000 each week. SmackDown probably gets about 2 million. So yeah, that's sort of what we're looking at on the ballpark figure here. And I think that for it as a debut, some will say it's not the strongest, it's not the best, but he was heavily featured in the way he was put onto TV and portrayed. I didn't see him as a third wheel, as I've seen some accusations made online. Yes, he was like the focal point of when he was introduced in the interview. He was ringside watching the tag team match, but hey, look, he was not going to be scheduled if he was just debuting. He was brought in by them on that night. GMs didn't know that he was there, or Adam Pearce didn't know he was going to be there. He'll probably be in a match next week against Kofi Kingston, because of course he was the distraction which led to the victory for Sheamus and Rich Holland, and also he gave a beatdown to Kofi after the match as well. He looked strong, he looked quite dominant in it as well, and I'll be honest, I've actually posed the fantasy booking idea of him being in a trio with Sheamus and Rich Holland previously. So for me, not the worst debut by any means, but the name is awful. And I don't know, maybe if we just look at it and say, like, do we add a surname to it? I know it's meant to be a nickname, but just something just to change it further. We had Butch Reed as a superstar, half of the tag team Doom, of course, was the first ever man eliminated from a Royal Rumble match back in 1988, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't seem such a bad name when you got Reed attached to it. I don't know. If people had called him James Dunne, for example, instead of Pete Dunne, would people be making the same hoo-ha? I wonder if that's what WWE is really trying to get to, because if they think, well, hang on, Twitter's going to explode, they're going to remember the name, it's going to be instant. We're all talking about Butch. That's what we're talking about. Not talking about Pete Dunne. We're talking about Butch. It's got over, isn't it? Maybe not in the right way. We're not liking it, but we've not forgotten it, and we're talking about it. So I think that's what WWE is looking to do. And unfortunately, this is not going to be the last of it. And that's why, personally, if you want my instant reaction of what I thought of this, I found it funny, if I'm going to be honest, because, well, I mean, to be honest, WWE is doing this so often. I think Doudrop is still the worst name that we've come up for a wrestler in the last sort of 6 to 8 months or so, but still, it's not going to be the last either, so it's something I'm kind of getting used to and digesting. It's supposed to be entertainment, I guess, at the end of the day, and hey, I got a bit of a kick out of it. But you could see Pete Dunne's face. He didn't look overly happy, did he? Let's be fair. I wonder if that's going to be just the usual Pete Dunne demeanour, or if that's going to be the fact that he's called Butch as well. We'll have to wait and see. But apparently, rumour mill is that backstage, a lot of people were not happy about the name change either. Let's see how long that's going to last. Will it, you know, make a tweak here and there? Like I said, we'll add a surname to it. It's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do. But yeah, I mean, I'm out of words really for it. It's a bit crazy, it's a bit mental, but it's not the worst debut in the world. Let's see where it goes for him next in the next few weeks. Hopefully, he's not going to be a third wheel in this group. Personally, for me, I can see him being in the tag team with Ridge Holland, perhaps being even future SmackDown tag team champions on the brand. I think Sheamus will be the single star going probably for the singles gold, but who knows? Butch versus Ricochet could be a fun match to see as well. So I don't rule anything out at this point. Sheamus and Ridge Holland have been the team up until this point. Let's see where he's going to fit in on SmackDown. Next question comes from Martin Lorenzo Carrillo. With the outrageous support for fans on Big E's injury, hope nothing but the best for him. Should WWE really skyrocket him into the main event scene once again? And how would you build him back up once he returns? Great question here from Martin there, and like you say, Big E, what a horrible injury, horrible moment for him, landing on his head on that belly-to-belly suplex. Of course, the other major talking point from that tag team match there with the New Day and Sheamus and Ridge Holland. Accidents happen in WWE, and it's really a shame to see, but there is some good news that's come out of it. Big E, you know, he still has movement in his hands and in his body. He doesn't need surgery, so that's really good news, but sadly, it is a broken neck. But you can see the outpour of support from, you know, from fans, from wrestlers, and I've got to say for myself, I wish him nothing but the best. Seems a real positive guy, such a good spirit, seems to be, you know, so popular amongst, you know, the wrestlers, his peers in the wrestling industry. I wish him nothing but the best, and I wish him a very, very speedy recovery. Like you say, his return is going to be very important in WWE, and I really hope that WWE listens to the, you know, the outpour of support for Big E. We want to see him do good things. He's got to come back as a top babyface. He's got to be pushed to the moon. He's got to be pushed to pick up victories, and he's got to be pushed back in the main event picture. That's certainly the way I would do it. Now, to say when is he going to return, obviously there's no time frame on it at this point. I imagine he's going to be out for a very, very long time. Obviously, if he could be back for, say, like a Royal Rumble next year, that would be a great place to bring him back. Maybe win the Royal Rumble, go into a main event at WrestleMania. That would be a nice instant way to do it, to be one of the main championship matches. But, you know, wins are what matter, and that's what I think. You know, Big E hasn't had the best start of 2022. Obviously, he lost his championship at day one. He then lost clean after making the challenge to heel Seth Rollins a couple of days later on Raw. And then obviously Royal Rumble wasn't a great performance either. Was quietly drafted over to SmackDown, so he was just taken out of the main event scene altogether. So it's just not been the perfect start of 2022 for Big E. But fingers crossed, things will get back on track, and like you say, when he comes back, he's got to be pushed as a top babyface. Next question coming from Mike, Italian Habs Mike, saying Seth Rollins doesn't have an opponent for WrestleMania 38, though it's rumoured to be Cody Rhodes. It's rumoured Rhodes shows up on Raw. How would you start the program to gain fans' interest? Fantastic question, this one. I'm going to give a shout out to Tom Colley here for a bit of the source work on this one, because as far as I'm aware, the contract is on the table for Cody Rhodes, but at the time of recording, there has been no knowledge that the contract has been signed by Cody. There were plans in place for Cody versus Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 38, although there is a backup plan in place. So I have to wait and see what that backup plan could be, because a lot of the top names now, they're not around. I suppose if like a Bobby Lashley wants to actually return, if he was cleared to be in time for WrestleMania and then could take time off afterwards, then maybe you could do that match, because after all, I mean, Seth did do the buckle bomb, or you know, did the power bomb to Austin Theory that went through the pod, which got him taken out of the chamber. So that makes sense to put that match together. But the idea of Cody Rhodes coming in, will he debut on Raw? Well, it all comes down if he signed that paperwork or not. But you know, WWE would love the idea of having one of the people that founded and created AEW to be a part of their show once again, and also a part of this WrestleMania. It would be a big match, him versus Seth Rollins. So that's where my main focus is going to be on for this question, because I'm thinking that if Cody is going to debut for WWE for WrestleMania, it's going to be on Raw tomorrow night. If he doesn't debut tomorrow, unless it happens on the night of WrestleMania as an open challenge match for Seth Rollins, I can't see how else it would happen. And let's not forget, tomorrow's Raw is in Jacksonville, Florida, which is very key demographic for AEW of where it started. Let's not forget Daily's place, all the rest of it. It would be kind of perfect as a little dig from WWE if Cody was to show up on this Raw. But I think for Seth Rollins, the way he has to go about to start building a program with whoever it's going to be is probably to take a bit of a note from KO's book, because KO had an idea and they were supposed to look to try and get on WrestleMania together. Obviously now Seth versus KO can't happen either because KO is now attained with Steve Austin. We're going to see if that's going to lead to, you know, anything more than a physical altercation. I'm guessing a stunner at least for Kevin Owens. Still not 100% convinced it turns into a match, but we're going to talk more about that later. But still, for me at this particular moment, looking at it, Seth can turn and say, well, KO found a way into WrestleMania. I've got to find a way to do that because there's no one really here for me. Who's someone going to step up? Maybe he puts out an open challenge from anyone to any wrestler in the world. Doesn't matter where they come from, whether it's Japan, whether it's United Kingdom, whether it's from a rival company. Maybe suggest an idea, not saying the forbidden door, perhaps suggesting a WWE term of what that could be, and that could lead then to perhaps where we hear Cody's music come in. I don't know if Cody still has the rights to having Kingdom played in WWE or if it'll be smoke and mirrors, but either way, if Cody was to come in and debut through that at the end of the show, that certainly would be quite an interesting note to build their match for WrestleMania 38. But I'm not convinced of what Seth's plans are going to be at this particular point for WrestleMania 38. It's the one real stumbling block I have, but still, it's going to be very interesting to see how it's going to play out. I still remain hopeful that Cody will debut and we will get that match on WrestleMania because it's a match I'm personally keen on seeing. I do think it's at Seth Rollins level as well, the fact that you've got someone that's coming from AEW, and let's not forget as well, ratings were much better back in the day when Cody was in WWE, so he is probably seen as a fairly household name to many. Of course, son of a plumber as well, so they can start using all those references as well for the American Nightmare. But it's going to be interesting to see how it's going to play out. Let me know how you'd like to see Cody debut, who you think Seth will be facing at WrestleMania in the comments below. FAF Wrestling of our next question now. Other than KO, who would you have liked to see Austin be involved with in a segment at WrestleMania? Great question, this one, and let's be fair, I think KO is the perfect guy to do so right now because KO is a fantastic talker. He has this talk show segment, he's using the stunner as well, so KO is the perfect guy. But I've got two answers for you, and I mean the first one obviously is Seth Rollins. I think Seth is great on the mic. I'm loving the character work right now. I do think that him and Austin, I think, could put on a very entertaining segment if they were to do so at WrestleMania. The other one I've got for you, and this is the one I think would be my perfect answer, but I don't think he's in the right placement right now for it, is someone actually from NXT. It's LA Knight, because I do think he's a fantastic talker. I do think him and Austin back and forth would be hella entertaining. The only thing is right now, LA Knight hasn't got the stock in his name value that a Steve Austin has, and you know, to look at the caliber of superstars like Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins has. Maybe in a year's time from now, that's something we could look at and perhaps dream about. But LA Knight and Steve Austin on the mic together, back and forth, I think would be really, really entertaining. Next question is coming from NXT Finale Silky in the house. Do you feel Vince McMahon just uses Raw and SmackDown as sitcoms just to set up premium live events? Because we seem to get less and less wrestling each week on TV. Well, if SmackDown's anything to go by, yeah, I would kind of agree with to this point. There seems to be less and less wrestling all the time in WWE, and to be fair, this isn't anything really new either. I remember back in like 10 years ago, there was like 2-hour shows, and it was seen as like 28 minutes of wrestling on the whole show. So it's not really anything new that we've got in WWE at this particular moment, but I just think of all the cuts that they do backstage and people come to the ring, and you know, I mean, we look at SmackDown this week as well. We're supposed to have a 6-man tag team match with Drew McIntyre and the Viking Raiders against Jinder Mahal, Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss, and of course that kind of got interrupted into a bit of a melee, and that didn't end up being a match. So we kind of had that opening match with the tag match we've discussed heavily now on this Q&A, up until we got the women's tag team match with Sasha Banks and Naomi against Shayna Baszler and Natalya. There was a good 40 minutes between the, you know, that end of that match and then the next match starting. So yeah, I mean, it's quite bad when you look at it from TV time perspective, and we do seem to be getting less and less. And like we say, with the uses of names of Butch and Doudrop and stuff like that, there is an argument that a sitcom factor is being brought into WWE. So I think it's an interesting point you make there, and to be honest, I kind of agree with you. I would prefer to see more wrestling. I don't necessarily have to see longer matches. For me, I feel that it's nice to see longer matches on the premium live events. I think that's where you can kind of get the maximum out of a match. If you see a 20-minute classic on Raw, then there's no need to do a rematch. There's no need to really continue that story on, because we had it there, especially if there's a clean finish. That match is decided. We've seen the best of what these people can throw out in a 20-minute match. We don't need to see it again. So for me personally, I'd rather see more I don't know, 4 to 5 minute matches, whether they have a screwy finish, whether they have a roll-up or something that can continue a story and where there feels to be a need for a rematch further on down the line, rather than seeing a blow-off on a weekly TV show. But at the same time, I'd rather not see lots of silly skits put together that don't really add up or make any sense, and then we just get a 2-minute match thrown in somewhere and we think that we got, like, say, 20 odd minutes of wrestling on a 2-hour show. For me, it does feel far too little in this day and age, because, hey, even though WWE is an entertainment company, yes, it's supposed to be a wrestling company, it's based around wrestling, so I want to see wrestling on this show. I want to see stories, don't get me wrong, but I also want to see wrestling. I'd at least like to see it half and half. That would be my perfect preference if I was to get the choice. Next question comes from Super Sonic X, saying, with Andrade kicking Matt Hardy out of the AHFO, will he replace Private Party and the Butcher and the Blade and start his own faction as rumours suggest? Great question, this one, and to be fair, I think everybody saw Matt Hardy being kicked out of this group as soon as Andrade came in, especially once we knew Jeff Hardy was released from WWE. It was not really any kept secret that he would ever be joining All Elite Wrestling. In fact, I think even I said it, I think on the release video, it's like, usually I don't like saying it, but you know, you usually think someone like Jeff Hardy, you knew he was going to be fine, you knew he was going to go to AEW, you knew he was going to go back with his brother, because they wanted to finish their career together, and it looks like they'll be doing that now in All Elite Wrestling. But hey, Andrade is the focus of this topic point of the question, and like you say, this is something that definitely could go down here, because, well, I mean, Andrade could look and see what Private Party, it would naturally be a natural fit for them to go against the Hardy Boys. They could lose the match, and then, well, hang on, you've let me down. This group is supposed to be full of winners. Butcher and the Blade get a go, and they lose as well. You know, Andrade, for me, I think would want to find that perfect stable, and that's been kind of the story of Andrade since coming to All Elite Wrestling, because really, I don't think Andrade's been booked the best. I actually still think his best work has been in NXT. I actually think that his work on Raw and SmackDown at this point has been strong. He's had some great matches, don't get me wrong, some great matches with the likes of Pac. We even saw the match of Revolution, the 6-man that he was in there, the Tornado tag team match. Some great action, but as a storyline, as a character, he seems to be always looking for this stable, and it doesn't seem to be quite clicking for him. And I do feel that this stable that he's in now, this was the stable that was just thrown together of people that had nothing to do. So for me personally, I wouldn't mind Andrade sort of getting rid of this stable and then start trying to create the perfect stable. Maybe bring some people in that would fit perfectly for this group. I mean, obviously now with Tony Khan actually owning Ring of Honor, all the contracts that went out as well. You know, if we can get the likes of Bandito to come in to join on with Andrade, perhaps someone like a Rouge as well, if he's fit and good to go again. I hope he's healthy now. You know, that would be fantastic to see them as a trio in AEW, and then perhaps maybe we can finally get the full benefit out of Andrade and Lido in All Elite Wrestling, because there is a start in and amongst there. I just don't think we're getting to see it that well at this particular moment, but certainly there's some great matches still to have with Andrade in the meantime. But certainly this stable stuff needs addressing, and like you say, there is a potential that this stable may not work out, because I can see all these teams failing Andrade, and I can see him getting upset because, well, you know, failure is not an option, it seems, for Andrade Alidolo. Last question this week coming from the Bama Slammer Wrestling Podcast. With the growing build to WrestleMania, it seems almost obvious that Bianca, Naomi and Sasha Banks will win gold before it's over. Do you think it'd be a good idea to form a female Nation of Domination or Hurt Business, and who would you add as the 4th or 5th members? Interesting question, this one. To be honest, really, I think that the idea of a female faction seems a really good idea, because we don't really seem to get a lot of that in WWE. I mean, yes, we get teams, granted, and WWE likes to break them up very, very quickly, but the idea of a female stable seems to work really, really well for me, and a Nation of Domination type stable for the ladies, I think could be quite fun. The Hurt Business found a way to make the motive work really well in 2020, 2021, because obviously the Nation of Domination was quite a controversial gimmick. I'm not sure that that sort of gimmick would work right now in 2022, but going off the mold of the Hurt Business, if you can find that motive, certainly this group would be great fun and great to see. As for additional members, Tamina, I think, would be the first shout there to actually reunite the full-on Team Bad that we had before. Of course, Team Bad was a trio, I think, back in 2015 when they first started, with Sasha Banks being called up to the main roster with Naomi, and Tamina was the group, so that would reunite them together with Bianca Belair, and I'd bring someone up from NXT, some young gun that I think certainly would have a bright future. And I think someone like a Kaden Carter would be quite good, or an Amari Miller would be quite suitable for that role. But to give my answer, I'd probably go with Kaden Carter, and then she could turn her back on Casey Catanzaro, which I think would be quite an interesting story to see. But that's all we've got time for anyway for Ask SCW this week. Hope you enjoyed the video as always. Go and check out Non-Stop Wrestling Chat as well. I got to join him for This Week in Wrestling on his channel. It was a great discussion as always, so make sure you go check their video out if you haven't already. And while you're here as well on this channel, then make sure to like the video as well. Drop a comment on any of the topics that have been discussed today. I look forward to interacting with you. Just leave the hashtag AskSCW. Watch some of the videos on the screen right now as well. Take care. Have yourselves a great day. Thank you for watching as always. You've been watching SCW here on YouTube. Take care.